How's it going, everyone? Got a lot to talk about in this video. Seems like the news that really made the rounds recently regarding Marvel's Spider-Man 2. Looks like we have a release window for that, a potential release window. I think it's around the time a lot of us had been expecting, so we'll talk about that. And we have quite a few updates on Final Fantasy 16, which at this point, I know a lot of you guys, your most anticipated game of the year is probably Spider-Man 2. FF16 still takes the cake for me, and the gameplay we've seen thus far of the game has looked fantastic, and maybe I need to see gameplay of Spider-Man 2 before it takes that position, but super excited for the game. Got some new information on that, so I want to talk about that as well. Okay, but first of all, looks like news on Spider-Man 2, which honestly kind of surprising that we haven't seen gameplay of the title yet, but I honestly also kind of like it that it's like not something that we're getting content updates on, and I'm sure that Sony is preparing for a major information rollout for this game ahead of its fall 2023 release. But according to the voice actor for Venom in the game, Tony Todd, who we had heard briefly in the game's reveal trailer, Marvel's Spider-Man 2 looks like it might be out in September. He noted in a response, looks like September, massive publicity coming in August, commercials start dropping in August, so I'm told. Hold on to your and hold your breath, gonna be necessary. So September is the release window I think a lot of people had been expecting, especially because if you go back to 2018, that's actually when Spider-Man Spider-Man 2018 dropped in September, so a September 2023 release window, 5 years after the release of the original, and I still, a 5-year window for these games to come out, it's just so long sometimes, but with how big these games are, with how much attention to detail that is put towards these games, and given the fact we did get Miles Morales, we did get City That Never Sleeps, we did have Insomniac do Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart in that time period as well, so they've been fairly busy to say the least. But yeah, this is the game that's really going to be, I think, the big exclusive that if you bought a PlayStation 5 at launch back in fall of 2020, this is probably the exclusive that many people had been waiting on. I know there's a lot of people that probably would lean towards Final Fantasy 16, but Spider-Man 2 is that game that I think from a mainstream standpoint, from a commercial standpoint, this game is going to do colossal juggernaut numbers. And I saw when the September window kind of got dropped, a lot of people pointed towards, oh man, Spider-Man 2 and Starfield are going to come out in the same month. Are they direct competitors with one another? Absolutely not. They're totally different games, but you guys know how things work in this community that has allegiances towards plastic boxes. Oh, social media is gonna be an absolute dumpster fire come September, and come when these Metacritic scores come out, and I ain't trying to say that I'm better than any of these people because I am guilty of that as well. Look, I had to make the direct comparisons of the Forspoken Metacritic scores and the Hi-Fi Rush Metacritic scores back in January, just because, to me personally, we don't talk Xbox that much on this channel, but I found it humorous that Hi-Fi Rush just got stealth dropped in and got better scores than Forspoken, and deservedly so. Hi-Fi Rush is an awesome game, and Forspoken, let's just say is kind of mid. But yeah, I think the vitriol when it comes to Spider-Man 2 and Starfield, if they potentially come out at the same month, oh man, the fanboys gonna have a field day with this one, and honestly, I'm kind of all for it. I'm kind of down to see all the degeneracy and the name calling that's gonna go down over some superfluous Metacritic scores, but we'll see how it turns out. I think Spider-Man 2 is gonna do really well. Starfield, I'm a little bit skeptical about, just because whenever a game has seen as many delays as that game has had, and Bethesda hasn't had a super hot track record as far as their open world titles go, so we'll see how it turns out. Hopefully both games turn out to be really good. Hopefully they both score a 90 on Metacritic, and honestly, if they both score the exact same on Metacritic, it would be hilarious, because I think the debate would be amplified tenfold if that would happen. But nonetheless, Spider-Man 2 I think is going to turn out to be really remarkable, and from a selfish standpoint, I am a little bummed out that Insomniac is so much entrusted with doing these Marvel titles. I would like to see them do more with Ratchet & Clank. I would like to see them do other stuff, but I get it from a Sony standpoint. If you're thinking about what games are going to draw in the most amount of money, what games are going to sell the most amount of PS5s, a Spider-Man 2, a Wolverine, those are going to be your juggernauts, your colossal titles that are going to sell a lot of copies, comparatively speaking to, let's say, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, as good as that game was. But nonetheless, September window, take it with a grain of salt for now, but I think that was the window a lot of us were expecting. Alright, moving on from that, Final Fantasy 16, we have a bit of an update on that game. Now, it was noted that by Naoki Yoshida that the game will be around 35 hours in length. However, that is just if you complete the main story. If you decide to do all of the content, 100% the game, that'll take you around 70 to 80 hours, which I think is a perfect time frame for the game. A 35-hour main story, which, you know, sometimes I hear these numbers that developers will throw out before a game's released, and sometimes I do beat the game maybe 10 to 15% a little bit quicker if I do rush through the main story. But with a game like this, I think most people are going to take their time with it, especially with how the game is going to be laid out. I think you're going to want to do all of the side content as you go, depending on the quality of the side content. Not only that, the main story of Final Fantasy 16, you do have a total of 11 hours in just cutscenes, so expect something. Obviously, it's Final Fantasy. It's going to be incredibly narrative-driven, but on top of that, if you do want replayability, there is going to be a New Game Plus mode right out the gate. That's going to allow you to carry over your stats, offering even more gameplay hours, so that's going to be something to keep you invested in as well. I think this game looks fantastic. I have a lot of faith in Yoshida and his team in delivering a Final Fantasy game that it's hard to say it's gonna have unanimous praise, because it's very rare for any game in this social media era that we live in to have unanimous praise. I think, although Resident Evil 4 Remake, that is gonna have unanimous praise. But in the case of FF16, some people are just not gonna be down with the more action-heavy gameplay style, and it's gonna be hard for it to have absolute unanimous praise. But you look at the recent Final Fantasy offerings, Final Fantasy 15, Final Fantasy 13, Final Fantasy 12, the last 3 games, and we're talking going back to 2006 with FF12, but I even remember back then, all 3 of those games incredibly divisive, and I would say appreciating in divisiveness with each outing. 12 was fairly divisive. I know if you look at the Metacritic score, I know that nowadays the people that play 12 usually end up really enjoying it, but if you go back to 06, a lot of people weren't down with that combat system. A lot of people didn't enjoy that game, even though it got like a 93 on Metacritic or something like that. 13, obviously incredibly divisive, quite possibly the most divisive Final Fantasy game ever. And then at 15, I could say quite possibly the most divisive Final Fantasy game ever, where, you know, that game was just incredibly disappointing to me from a narrative standpoint. But I think with FF16, maybe this is just foolish of me to believe this, I think most people are going to be very happy with what this game ultimately is, because you have such a stylish action combat system. And I think for a 2023 audience, they are going to gravitate that towards, that a lot more than, let's say, a turn-based battle system. Turn-based still works. There's a lot of quality turn-based games, but I think for a larger audience in 2023, you'll want something faster paced, you'll want something action heavy, and I think FF16 is going to offer you that. Really like the idea of the story based on what we've heard thus far. Does seem to be a more mature, darker Final Fantasy narrative, so just ultimately super excited to see how this one turns out. Obviously, the game will be dropping June 22nd. At this point, a PS5 exclusive. We had heard that, you know, no PC release will be happening in 2023, but I could see that happening in 2024, and maybe even Square Enix is going to be a little bit smart with how they handle things as far as exclusivity agreements go. We'll see how that ultimately turns out, but that'll do it for me. Again, Spider-Man 2 looks like that'll be coming sometime in September. Take that with a grain of salt, but that makes all the sense in the world. Final Fantasy 16 going to be an incredibly lengthy experience, especially if you decide to 100% the title. 70 to 80 hours for the 100% if you rush through the main story. I think 30 to 35 would be a solid amount to kind of gauge it at. That's going to do it for me. Sound off with all of your thoughts in the comments section down below. Thank you for watching, and goodbye. Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, make sure to hit the subscribe button, and if you're already subscribed, do us a favor and hit the bell icon. This way you'll be notified whenever we post a new video. That's the best way to keep up with all of our uploads, and we usually try to upload 2 videos a day. And with the bell icon hit, you'll be notified whenever we do upload a video. As always, thanks for watching.